Welcome back to another week of career mapping with Mal and Mel. I'm Mallory from More Than an Admin, and I'm always joined by the amazing Melanie from Elevation Chief of Staff Training. And this week we are talking about one of my favorite topics, which is networking. I feel as though if anyone knows me, they would say that I am a huge networker. It's something that I've always been since I was in college. After being a very shy, introverted person for a long time in my life, I decided to start networking. So we are going to start off with Mel sharing one of her tips, and we're going to go back and forth. And hopefully, you can get at least a few gems from us this week on basically how to be an amazing networker as a chief of staff for EA. So, Melanie, you want to start us off?
Yeah. So the first thing I always tell people when it comes to networking is that it's so great. There's lots of groups and communities and associations for people with your same profession, right? There's the Chief of Staff Network, which I love. I always go to their events as often as I can. EAs, there's a ton of great social groups and clubs and different networking opportunities there. But I have a little bit of a controversial take because I always tell people that's great when you have a job. When you are looking for a job, you need to be networking with the decision makers. So whether that is going to startup events and finding founders that you can speak to, going to places where there's executives in your industry, industry conferences, wherever you can go, where those people that can make the decision to bring you onto the team, to hire you, to introduce you to someone who might need you, that's who you need to be networking with. So my first piece of advice is always find those hire or decision makers. Find those decision makers that can hire you and network with them. Get to know them. They're the people who maybe this week they don't have a job for you, but you're building a relationship. You're getting to know them. And so hopefully your job search isn't long. Hopefully you find something, but let's say a month later they need someone and they're thinking of you, right? Because you met them, you've built that relationship. So that would be my first tip.
Love that one. Not controversial to me. I feel as though I'm also someone that shares that same sentiment with a lot of people. When I was an admin at Google, I often went to entrepreneurial events because I didn't think I was going to be an admin as long as I like fell in love with, eventually fell in love with the role. But in the beginning, I was going to all these entrepreneurial events. So I have a lot of entrepreneur founder contacts who are oftentimes looking for admins. So I try to help match them with people in my network. But I feel the same exact way. I think that a lot of times, not only just for networking to like get a job, but also just for like knowledge. Like I've learned a lot from being the only admin in the room with a lot of founders and entrepreneurs. So I think that that's a really good piece of advice. And then the only other thing I want to share is a lot of times people think that you have to get ahead, like match with recruiters or connect with recruiters on LinkedIn or network with them. But a lot of times it's so much easier if you directly connect with, like you said, the decision maker. And when I was applying to Spotify a while ago now, I feel as though I usually am like, oh, just a couple years ago. And I'm like, dang, it was probably like almost 10 years ago. They only had listed being an admin for the VP of growth and marketing. And I was like, oh, I don't know who that is. So I looked just VP of growth and marketing, Spotify on LinkedIn, found the person, and actually reached out to them on Twitter. And then they responded, and I sent them my resume and cover letter. And then I ended up being a finalist. I ended up choosing Google, but like, and we'll have another segment on, optimizing social media. So I'll probably talk a little bit more in depth about, my decisions on that. But I think that for me, it really taught me trying to get ahead and find out who's actually the people hiring. And I think that you'll have a sometimes a higher chance of getting a role. So I think that that's a really great piece of advice. Anything else you want
Yeah.
to
The
share?
other the other cool thing too, when it's a startup especially, and you're interacting with these founders and these entrepreneurs, is that sometimes you can get ahead even of them realizing that they need the role, right? And
Yes.
so a lot of times there's someone who has a great idea, they start building their company, they might need an executive assistant and not have even had the time yet to put out a JD. They might need a chief of staff and not, sometimes they don't even know what a chief of staff is. So when you can come along, you get to know them, you build that rapport, and then you tell them, hey, do you have an EA yet? Do you have a chief of staff yet? Here's how one could be helpful for you. And in fact, I'm one. And, let's continue the conversation from there. So sometimes you can even, I always say it's a little like backdoor hack. They might not even realize they need someone, but when you're interacting, networking with them, and then you propose that, you can get ahead of, the cold application, the hundreds of other people. So yeah, that's just another reason why it's so important. Network with those decision makers, those CEOs, those founders. They're looking to grow their team, and go from there.
I think that you hit on something that's so important is sometimes you might have to educate people, and some admins and chiefs of staff might be like, how does, like, that's not my job, like these people should know it. But to me, I'm like, I feel so honored when I could be the person who can share, because obviously you're kind of like molding that person's also view of whatever that role is from like your own perspective. And I remember when I was at Google, I loved being leaders first admin. I was like, I can kind of, like, I would be very open, like, this is how being an admin is, this is how I can help you. And I kind of set them up. I think I set them up very well for whoever they had after me to have hopefully a good view of the role, all that we're capable of. And I think that, like you said, like, especially with people who have never had admins before, or potentially who we know are going to need one at some point, you could really have a big impact on them even thinking about hiring someone. And sometimes people think that networking is really just like this transactional thing, but sometimes it's like, even if they don't hire you, like maybe they can hire someone in your network too, that you might know that's a better fit. So I love that tip. And it kind of leads me into my own tip, which is a lot of times people will come to me that are very introverted or shy, and they think of networking as something that is very scary, very intimidating. But I think that we need to reframe networking as this very transactional thing into something that's simply just making a connection with someone. So I tell people networking does not just happen at large events. You don't have to just, like, that's not the time to me that I think about even really networking always. I think about networking is when I'm in the grocery store, when maybe I just met up with one of my friends, Caitlin, who's an admin. Shout out to her. We went to a place called Armature Works in Tampa, and we were just walking around. And if I saw someone that, I don't know, we were both standing and waiting for coffee, maybe I just say to them like, "Oh, I love your shirt. Oh, what are you doing in Tampa today?" That can be networking, and that's how I really reframed networking when I was, again, really shy and introverted back in the day in college. Is I really just saw it simply as making a connection with someone and not waiting until these big, large scale events to think of it that way. Even like when I'm at an event, honestly, like a family event, or my mom has her friends over and I'm there, you just don't know who knows people in the room. You sometimes don't know what people do. And I think that for me, I'm never really looking at someone as like, what can they give me? Or like, what can I give them? It's really just like, does this person have a shared value? Do we have shared interest? And like, could that potentially later on blossom into something? And there have been so many connections that I have made with people that I just had something cool in common because, again, we met at a bar because we were both alone, or at a concert. And later on, that blossomed into whether it's a speaking opportunity, a job opportunity, people coming to me again about trying to help them find the right admin for them or for their cousin or whoever it is. So I think sometimes we have to really frame this idea of it's not supposed to be this scary thing. It's really actually supposed to be like a joyful thing of just like connecting with someone else. And something that sometimes it can be very hard on people and a little bit, maybe again, having a rough around the edges approach is we're all adults. And I really believe if you're an adult, you should be able to have a conversation with a stranger and it not be such a scary thing. Like, we really need to ask ourselves. And I had to do this. Like, I had to do the inner work. I've been to therapy. Like, why am I so scared about talking to another human being and being so scared that they're not going to like me or that they're going to think something bad or I'm going to be pushy or this person's not going to have an opportunity for me? It's like, let's have an abundance mindset. Let's be confident in ourselves and realize that, again, if we want to get paid a salary, we have to be able to talk to strangers. We have to be very comfortable with that. And just like in previous videos, you'll hear me speak about this a lot, and you'll probably see me post about this a lot more too, is think of job searching like dating. If you are single, you can go out to a bar or the library or wherever, and every person technically is someone that you can potentially date. And just think about it as networking. Anyone that you see could be someone who could potentially open a door for you. You can open a door for them. Like, again, networking doesn't have to always be that you're looking for someone that can help you. It could be that you help them, and then 3 years down the line, they're getting you your dream job. So that's kind of my first tip, is this reframing of it to be something scary and just transactional to simply something that's about finding a meaningful connection with another person.
Yeah, and exactly that connection piece is so important. I was just reading something about how when we feel intimidated, it's often because we feel disconnected from someone. Usually it's in the sense of they're more successful than me, maybe it's a celebrity or a really high up executive. And so you feel this disconnection and that leads you to feeling intimidated by them. So when you can find like a common ground and you can connect with them and realize like, hey, we're all people, or we're all like, we all have our struggles, we all have our, strengths, and make that connection. Then when you go into that conversation, it feels a little less intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that sort of reframe. I would add my second tip is to learn more about that person. So a little bit along those lines. When you're networking, I hear all the time, I do career coaching. And so people are telling me all the time, oh, I've got to get my elevator pitch down. Can you help me with my elevator pitch? And how do I get this like perfect 30 seconds about me, or 60 seconds or whatever it is? And I'm like, whoa, let's actually, I say ditch the pitch, because when we're trying so hard to tell people about ourselves, that's actually not in our favor, right? So here's what I recommend to people: get to know about them.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people all the time, everyone's favorite subject to talk about is themselves. And that can sound kind of funny, but it's true, because when you think about it for yourself, right? You love being able to share your story and your background and your dreams and your goals. And when people give you an opportunity to share about yourself, you feel good about them. And so you want to, when you're networking, you want to be that person who gives them an opportunity to share about themselves. So this hits on what Mal was talking about with connection, making connections with people, not feeling afraid of that. But also when I was saying about meeting with founders, there's such a great way to approach them or any executive and talk about, how did you get into this industry? What got you excited about this mission? Like, where did this idea come from? Start to learn about that, because that's one, it's something they're going to be so excited to share with you, but also it's going to be something that makes them feel like good, and it gives you insight into who they are. These are people. We've talked about this before. Make sure it's someone you want to work for. So if you're sitting there like, how can I convince them to hire me and give me a job? Well, hold on, let's step back first to make sure that you want to work for them. So start asking questions about their mission, about their visions. Make sure that you have that alignment there. And so again, it's a twofold thing. One, they're going to be excited to talk to you about that. They're going to walk away from the conversation feeling great. And two, you're going to get a lot of insight about who they are, what they're building, what their company's about. So then if you do decide that this is an organization that you'd like to work for, then you can continue that conversation. And so that's when you hit them up on LinkedIn, an email, and you say, hey, it was so great meeting you yesterday at the coffee shop, or last weekend at the conference, wherever it was. It was so great meeting you. I really loved learning about your organization and what you're building. Can you tell me more about maybe the challenges you're facing? Or I heard about this new regulation or this industry, or things are shifting. What are some challenges you're facing? When they start to share with you what challenges they're facing, that's when you have the key, right? Because then you can say, hey, here's how I can clear up your bandwidth so that you can focus on that challenge. Or here's how I could help you address that challenge, and kind of go from there. But again, it's the main point of the tip is to learn about them. When you're networking, it's not just about telling everyone about yourself. Here's my resume, here's my business card, here's my elevator pitch. No, let's start with learning about that person. So then you can really be aligned and make sure this is someone I would like to work for. And I have the keys to how do I present myself as the solution.
That is awesome advice, because so many times people just start speaking about themselves, and then you kind of put the power in the other person's hand to see if they want to hire you. But really, if again, you get them speaking first. You can first decide, do I even want to open up to this person about my life? And do I want to open up to this person about who I am? And do I want to work for this person? So I think that that's a really, really good tip. And just being able to provide solutions, which you kind of also touched upon. I always say in a follow up note with networking, especially if it's a decision maker or someone you want to work with, if they presented a challenge, you should always, in that follow up, either just state your enthusiasm for tackling that challenge together or saying, I already have a solution. Or like dipping into what that solution potentially can be. So they kind of see it as like, oh, this person is like eager, this person is enthusiastic about this. Because a lot of people don't do that, sadly. They don't think about, again, how can I help this other person? They're just thinking about, I just want this job. Oh, I just hope that like we can work together. Oh, I just hope that this one, instead of, I believe what really stands out is when people talk about like, I can't wait to help you, like me be the unique person that gets to help you with your unique challenges. So I
Yeah.
think that that's really good advice to really learn about another person. Again, it's kind of like with dating. You don't want to just put your cards out there completely at first. You want the other person to also speak about their life and what they're going through so that you can see if you even want to date them and then marry them one day. So I think
Love
that
that.
that's a great tip. That's something that I had to learn, everyone, is usually when I used to date years ago, I used to share my entire life story, every trauma, everything. And then, of course, when I met Matt, even though he'll say that I talked more the first time, I didn't share everything about my life in that first conversation.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that it obviously worked because now we're together. But anyway, I love that tip. Mine is a little bit different going into networking online. So I'm sure you, Mel, I know I do get a lot of LinkedIn messages from people who are wanting to connect. And again, we're going to go into more of social media in a future video, but I think that this is really important because if you want to meet this person in person one day or get on a call with them, you have to really be thoughtful in your approach. So, like, my tip is very much establish a very thoughtful, cold messaging approach when you are approaching someone online. And you can be direct, but please do not be super pushy. And I'm going to explain a little bit about this. I will sometimes get messages from someone that literally will just say, can you get me a job? Or it will say, get me a job. Here's my resume and LinkedIn and my cover letter. Like, I don't even know I don't know them. We don't have a mutual connection. These are just random people and they mean very well. Like, I don't want people to think that these people are mean or that you have bad intentions. I know that. And I'm a nice person that can kind of like usually see that. A lot of people are usually just purely in desperation mode. I know people have been job searching a long time, but I want you to really think about if I went into your DMs and I said, can you give me $100,000 loan? Or will you marry me today? You'd probably think I was crazy. You'd be like, I don't know you. Are you going to even return me that money? Wait, you want me to marry you and we haven't even dated? It sounds absolutely ludicrous. And that's what you sound like to many people when you just say, can you get me a job? I don't know you. We don't have a mutual connection. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that. And that's why I think that everyone has to come up with a very thoughtful way to cold message. And in kind of the guide that I'm coming out with, I'm going to show you specifically how I've cold messaged people and how people have cold messaged me that have gotten me to really invest in them. One story I'll share very quickly is I had now a friend, but she had found me literally through researching Google admins on YouTube and basically reached out to me on LinkedIn and said this very nice message that was essentially like, I found you on YouTube. I started listening to some of your, like a podcast of yours. I found it really valuable. I'm looking for an admin role. I would love to meet with you. And like, if you have time, that would be great. If not, it's okay. It was very thoughtful. It was not generic. It was not asking me just to get them a job. And also she made it very easy for an out. Like she wasn't like, I need to speak to you this week. And it wasn't desperate, to be honest. It was very much like, if you have time, great. If you're not, I'm going to move on. And not only did we meet up, but I mean, we are good friends now. I had her speak at Google. I have helped her get not only one job, but I sent her another job recently. She just took that other opportunity. She's one of the only people that has my guide kind of in the pre-form, and she's always said like this has helped. And what I'm getting at is like, she reached out to me very thoughtful, and she not only got different job opportunities I kind of sent her way, but she got to speak at Google. She got to network with different people. You just never know, but it's all because of how she did her cold message approach that was very different than some other people that I get that's just like, just can you get me a job? Here's my resume. Tell me what you think. And I
Mm-hmm.
just want to go a few steps further is just remember that people have lives outside of LinkedIn or DMs or whatever. Like, just Melanie and I trying to schedule this. Like, we're like, okay, between your kids' stuff and like my grandparents' stuff and my boyfriend's visiting, like, we have lives and people get a lot of messages. So just remember if someone doesn't message you back right away, it's sometimes not you or even the message. It's just purely like people have lives. And the honest truth is that people cannot do free work all the time or we would be starving. I always say if I could do free work all day, every day, I would do it. But sometimes you can't. The other thing I would say is you should always, in your cold message approach, in my opinion, is research this person. If they have a podcast, if they have a YouTube channel, if they have a book, you should try to support them, even if you can't financially, right? Like a lot of us, I think, like I'm sure Mel, you and many other people, it's like we love to help. And it's not even about getting something from anyone. It's just like, oh, this person invested something in us, whether it's like listening to the podcast or liking something or subscribing. I mean, all like free things, right? Like you don't have to necessarily even purchase anything, but just liking something, listening to something, sharing something on LinkedIn. If you can offer something to anyone in return, I've done this with millionaires, with billionaires that I've like tried to connect with. And usually they will respond because they're like, oh, wow, this person invested something in me. Again, this is not a guarantee, but it's also just something nice to do if you are asking someone to read your resume for free, to do something for free that takes a lot of time and energy when someone doesn't know you. Remember, you're not going to ask someone straight up, usually, to marry you and pay all your bills and take you to a nice restaurant if you've not offering anything. If you're like, yeah, you're just going to do that for me and I'm not going to cook clean for you or I don't know, whatever else someone would maybe want. So just remember that. And then the last thing I'd say is when you cold message someone, when I try to do a cold message, I try to always find a personal connection, kind of what Mel said about learning about someone. And, some of her tips is really finding a connection. And how I said before, like just thinking about it as a thoughtful connection. I try whether it's a school that we both went to, whether it's we both lived in the same place, we're in the same industry. I try to find some kind of connection with someone. That's why I actually personally think it's really important to post something personal about you online too, so that people can either connect with you or you can connect with other people. Um, and so that's kind of, I guess, like my big tip is just be very thoughtful in your cold message approach, especially when you are messaging someone, whether it's LinkedIn, social media, anywhere online. And again, obviously in person, you also want to be thoughtful when you kind of speak to someone and start talking about whether it's yourself or asking for someone for help. Because we all know, like, working as a chief of staff and as an EA, we know what it's like when the people that we support have people come up to them at events or email them wanting help. Like, we need to remember how they feel and how their responses sometimes are. Sometimes we're drafting the comms for them right back. Like, we know what it's like when someone's like, hey, can you help me with X, Y, and Z? So just remember to be very thoughtful in your approach. Do you have anything to say, Mel?
Yeah, I'd add to that the follow up. So, like you said, we're all super busy. We have so much going on. I can't tell you how many times someone has reached out to me, and I will be like, "Okay, I want to get back to that person, but let me like research something real quick, or let me look something up real quick, or I have a million other things I've got to do," and I don't get back to them just out of like sheer like busyness.
Yeah.
But there's two ways that people react to that. Some people, they're like, hey, like, did you miss my message? They're like angry. They take it as like I'm ignoring them or neglecting them. And it's totally not the case. But when they approach it that way, then I'm like, wait, I don't want to deal with this person. I've even had like cold sales messages on LinkedIn and I don't respond because I actually, not that interested. But then when I had this person follow up and he was like, I guess that's a no. And he's like being like really like aggressive about it. Like, did you see my last message? Like, just being real weird about it. I forget the exact wording, but I was like, wow, I wouldn't want to work with someone like that anyways. On the other hand, I've had people follow up to, they've sent me cold messages and they followed up, like very understanding. I know you're super busy. And then wanting to add value. Like I saw something that made me think of you, or, they might comment on my post or, do things that I'm like, oh yeah, I need to get back to that person, but in a totally like kind, understanding way. And so that I'm always telling people too, like, don't burn bridges. And we'll talk about this later in the series too, because maybe someone doesn't respond to you right away when you're networking. Maybe someone rejects you for the job, right? But don't burn that bridge, because you never know what could happen a month later, 3 months later, however long down the line. So keep that like sort of positivity when you're sending the cold message, and then also when you're following up to it.
Love that. That is actually something that I definitely talk about in my guide too, about like thoughtful follow-up. So like in sales, just so that people know if they don't know, sales usually has a thing where it's like 7 follow-ups. So that's why if someone messages me on LinkedIn, they will keep messaging you until you say no, until you actually say. So just for people to know, for me, if you message me like repeatedly and you are aggressive, I will write you. Now I have like no chill. I'm not gonna lie. I have no chill. I'm like, I'm filing a restraining order if you message me ever again. Like I get really I'm like so done with certain people on LinkedIn that are specifically for very aggressive salespeople.
Mhm.
But also, I have had admins who have found my personal number, my personal email, have followed me on Instagram. Like I am now so thoughtful in who I send my phone number to, and I have had to tell people you need to chill out. There's a very big difference between following up and harassing someone when again you do not know this person and what they're going through. Like me and Mel are not posting all of our personal drama online. Like you do not know if we have something, a family member is sick or we're sick or something else is going on. And if you repeatedly message me specifically, I will get very upset because it puts so much more pressure, and then I feel guilty and I'm an empath and I'm like I feel bad and now I don't know how to respond, and I don't want to trauma dump on people sometimes when I'm going through something, but I have had to do that sometimes with people because they're so aggressive. And I think that again, people don't realize that for me, if someone follows up 2 or 3 times within a week, I am like now upset. Like I'm not working with this person unless again the follow up is like very kind, but you should really, in my opinion, only follow up with someone once after a week, unless it's urgent, right? We all know, like, but nothing with networking, I'm sorry, especially if you're cold messaging someone, is urgent. I don't even care if you have an interview the next day. Like, none of us, unless you're going to pay me, like, then maybe I'll respond to you a little bit quicker, but like, nothing is super urgent. If I don't know you and you're messaging me about something about your resume or cover letter, I think that's most of how people operate too. So I would say be very careful in how soon you follow up with someone and how aggressive you are with that message. Because just like Mel said, like it could be such a turnoff. And I have had that happen where I have gone, again, I've gotten a little bit in my crazy mode lately with people being like, have you seen this message? I know that you want to work with me. Like some people have been trying to convince me that I need a coach. And I'm like, I actually don't need a coach right now. Like I just need to execute. I know exactly what I'm doing. I do not need your help. You do not need to help coach me. Or I've had people again that will be like, I really need you to help me with this job. I think that you're the best person to do this. I really need your insight. And I'm like, okay, first of all, you're coming across again a little bit desperate. Let's go back to the dating model. If someone messaged you 5, 7, even 3 times in a week, you would probably say, this guy or girl is very desperate. Why are they messaging me nonstop? And so let's just remember that some people are just not going to respond. Some people have personal lives that are crazy or whatnot. And people will respond when they can. But again, I think that just like what Mel said, if people comment on my post, if they subscribe, if like I just am looking at sometimes a lot of those things too. Even when sometimes I forget to message Melanie back or my other friends, if they comment something on LinkedIn, I'm like, oh my gosh, I owe them a text message. So it will remind me to get back to people as well. So that's a very good, again, thoughtful way to follow up with actually not directly messaging someone. That I think is really good. Anything else you have for this networking portion? I feel like we've given a lot of good tips and insight.
Yeah, no, I think it's just, there's so many opportunities out there, finding the opportunities where they are, not thinking you have to wait until some big conference. but networking is everywhere. Get to know other people, learn about them so that you're sure that you even want to work with them and so that you know how to solve their or what problems they have that you might be able to solve. Yeah, I think you've got it. Can't wait to hear some
Yes.
exciting networking stories.
Yes, and I think what we're both getting at too is just be proactive in networking. A lot of people wanna network when they need a job, when in reality, your networking should just be continuous. Again, it's just talking to people, it's just making thoughtful connections. You never know who can help you. Even, like, talking, like, to your hairstylist. Like, when I'm in the hair salon, like, I'm telling them that I'm an EA and I'm telling them what I'm building, and sometimes they know someone that I'm like, "Oh, great." Like, that would be awesome if you can invite your admin to this, or if they need a job, I'm happy to speak with them. You just never know. And don't try to wait until you're in this desperation mode, because I think a lot of people make a lot of mistakes networking because they're in that desperation mode. But
Yeah,
I hope.
something I
Oh,
recently heard about that was build the well before you need the water.
oh, I love that quote. We're gonna have to put that in the YouTube description. I think that's an amazing quote, especially to end on. And just remember, everyone listening to, like, subscribe, share. Let us know in the comments, like, if you found a specific tip very valuable, or if you have your own tips as well. We're excited, like Mel said, to hear some of your great networking stories. I think it would be really cool if someone shared, again, a cool networking, maybe surprising story that either they got a job or just a good connection that they found through either one of our tips, if you took any of them, or in the past, if you've had any good networking tips that have really helped. And we hope to see you back again watching our next episode. And if you haven't watched the ones before, we have a playlist that you can find on the More Than an Admin YouTube channel called Career Mapping with Mal and Mel. And if you have any suggestions, tips for us that you want us to include in next videos, please DM us, whether on LinkedIn, Instagram, and you can find all of that information in the YouTube description. And I hope everyone has a blessed rest of your day.